After the user press the power button, the first program loaded and running on the computer is called bootstrap program. It is stored in the special type of memory named ROM or EPROM. So this type of memory is not power-demanding memory, which means they can keep data without power support. So usually we call it firmware. It can be written for a couple of times, but most of the time it is just for read purpose. So this program will initialize all the aspects of a system, such as whether there is a keyboard loaded up, whether there is a mouse, what kind of disk the computer has, whether it is a SSD or hard disk or both. So what is the rotation speed? So whether the monitor is loaded up and what is the resolution for the monitor has. And then the kernel of our operating system will be loaded up from hard disk and running on the computer. The kernel will initialize the software part of the system for the user. Remember when we talk about the computer system organization, the different device controllers can notice the CPU with interruption if they have some data ready to be processed on the CPU or they have finished their tasks. So now let's look at how the interruption works. So basically, when an interrupt happens, the CPU will save the address of the interrupted instruction on the memory, then transfer the control to the interrupted service routine through an interrupt vector. So actually, the interrupt vector stores the beginning address of the interrupt service routine. So what can cause the interrupt? As we have mentioned, the device controller can do so. For those kind of interruption, which is referred as hardware-generated interruption, or sometimes we call it hardware interruption. So for example, when you click the mouse or tap in something through the keyboard, the CPU will know, okay, you are using the mouse or keyboard right now, and the CPU will give you some corresponding response back to you. On the other hand, there's another type of interruption, which is called software-generated interruption or software interruption. Two examples are trap and exception. So first, let's see what is trap. So basically, trap is a chunk of code, so intentionally set by the operating system. So when the trap is executed, the control will be switched from user program to the operating system. So normally, the trap is called when the user program requests some services provided by the operating system. For example, the user program wants to read or write some data to the file. However, the user program cannot do it by itself. It must request the service provided by the operating system. So it will tell the operating system that I want to write the data into the hard disk. Then the control will be switched from user program to operating system. Then the operating system will send the data to hard disk device controller to write the data on the hard disk. So for this kind of operation, we need a trap. So surely you don't have to worry about those kind of things. So after you compile the code, the compiler will help you do everything. And also for this type of a procedure, actually it is called a system call. Later you will know that. Another type of software interruption is called exception. So as I have mentioned in the previous slide, one job of operating system is served as control program. So sometimes the software may have bugs because the software is written by human and no human is perfect, right? So when the bug shows up, the operating system needs to be aware about that. So for this situation, it is defined as an exception. So when the exception happens, the control will be switched from the software to operating system. For example, when the user runs some program that it is written by the user, there's integer divided by 0. So the program doesn't know what to do next. Then the software interruption will be triggered into the system. In order to avoid to affect other programs' execution, the program will be terminated and print out some error message on the screen to notice the user so what problem has been encountered by the operating system. So actually, operating system is interrupted driven. So after you push the power button on the computer, the operating system will be loaded onto the computer. So every procedure is triggered by interruption. So after the operating system is fully loaded, you may move the mouse or click the mouse or tap in something through the keyboard. The hardware interruption will be triggered. And also, you may run some software and read some data from the file. A software interruption called trap will be triggered. And then when a problem happened in a program, so in order to protect the operating system, another type of software interruption called exception will be triggered to protect the system from crashing.